All right, let's jump right in and set the scene here. Picture this. It's July 11th, 1944. We are deep in a hedgerow field just south of Saint-Lô in Normandy. A seasoned German sniper is lying dead still in the shadow of a stone wall. He's got his Kar 98K rifle perfectly wedged between two rocks, and his 4-power Zeiss scope is completely dialed in on a line of Americans about 200 yards away. Now, you've got to understand, this is a marksman who really knows his stuff. He's been doing this for 3 years. He fought outside Leningrad, he survived Kursk, he fought across the Dnieper crossings. He knows exactly how to read a chaotic battlefield. But as he pans his scope left to right across this little group of 8 American soldiers, he is completely and utterly baffled.
So we really have to ask the question, why couldn't this highly trained veteran find the American officers? Back on the Eastern Front, spotting a Soviet officer was almost too easy. It would take a sniper like him maybe 4 seconds, tops. But looking at these Americans, he saw absolutely everyone wearing the exact same gear, carrying really similar weapons, and, weirdly, acting the exact same way. Even when an order was shouted out, he couldn't tell who was actually speaking before they ducked back behind the hedgerow. Out of sheer frustration, he ultimately pulled the trigger and hit a private, just a regular rifleman. So why did this happen?
The contrast between the Eastern Front and Normandy was absolutely staggering. Over in the East, a single sniper shot often completely decapitated a platoon because they knew exactly who was in charge. But in Normandy, losing one American rifleman didn't paralyze the unit at all. The rest of the guys just kept moving forward. And here's the fascinating part. This wasn't an accident, it wasn't blind luck, and it definitely wasn't some spontaneous decision made by a general on a random Tuesday. What we're looking at is a radical, highly engineered system. It was made of 6 interlocking layers, built up over 3 years, a system specifically designed to tear down literally centuries of military tradition.
You see, for most of human history, armies accepted a pretty deadly bargain. An officer simply had to be visible in order to lead. If you think back to old paintings or even look at Soviet, British, and German columns from this era, you see incredibly clear markers. You've got different coats, swords, shiny hats, guys riding horses, or officers carrying little pistols while all their men carry long rifles. Basically, everything about them screamed, "Hey, look at me, I am in charge." It was standard doctrine. Because if your men couldn't spot you in the total chaos of battle, they couldn't follow you. But suddenly, with high-velocity rifles and telescopic sights entering the chat, that high visibility meant extreme vulnerability. And yet almost every army just accepted the cost. Except the Americans. They decided to break this centuries-old rule.
By 1943, the German Wehrmacht had established formal, dedicated sniper schools. They had learned the hard way that Soviet snipers were just devastating their own officer corps, so they responded by building an entire system to hunt enemy leaders. They essentially trained their snipers to act like predators hunting the lead animal in a herd. And they actually gave them this specific 6-item checklist to memorize. They were looking for a pistol in a hip holster, a leather map case, binoculars, better quality clothing like fine leather boots, someone taking a central position in a group, and someone receiving reports rather than giving them. If a German sniper spotted any 2 of those things together, boom, they had their target.
Which brings us right to part 1, Erasing the American Officer, where they systematically deconstruct that entire German checklist.
The United States Army essentially looked at that exact checklist and just started erasing every single item. It started right with the uniform. Step 1, ditch the Sam Browne belt. For 20 solid years, this thick, polished leather cross strap was the ultimate, most visible symbol of being a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. By early 1942, gone. Just completely erased. Step 2 was the M1941 field jacket. They issued this to absolutely everyone. Whether you were a high-ranking general or a brand-new private, you wore the exact same olive drab cotton shell with the exact same 4 pockets. No fancy tailoring for the brass. And step 3, the truly iconic M1 steel helmet. One single design, one shape, one color. Absolutely no peaked shiny caps allowed in a combat zone. So, from the shoulders up and the shoulders down, a seasoned veteran lieutenant looked exactly like a 19-year-old replacement fresh off the boat.
To really grasp how completely radical this American approach was, you just have to look over at their allies. British officers fighting in Normandy were still frequently wearing much finer cloth, totally different colored berets, and occasionally even keeping that leather cross strap. In fact, one British commanding officer actually discovered his junior officers were wearing roll-neck sweaters specifically to hide their ties and rank insignias. He ordered them to stop doing it immediately, and his reasoning is captured in this genuinely chilling quote right here. "If we were to die, we must die as officers.
It really shows you how deeply embedded that moral and class tradition was. But the Americans? They just didn't share that instinct at all. They were perfectly happy to prioritize pragmatic, gritty survival over showing off visible class distinctions.
But, just hiding the uniform wasn't going to cut it because a smart sniper could just look down at the weapons. A pistol sits right in a holster on the hip, and a guy carrying a little pistol physically moves differently than a guy lugging around a heavy battle rifle. Having a pistol was basically flying a massive visual red flag on a battlefield. Recognizing this massive liability, way back in 1940, the U.S. Army issued a requirement for a completely new classification of weapon, a light rifle weighing under 5 pounds. By mid-1942, this brand new weapon, the famous M1 carbine, entered full production specifically to replace the pistol for officers, NCOs, and radio operators.
And to actually pull this off, the scale of this shift had to be mind-blowing. The U.S. cranked out over 6 million M1 carbines. To put that into perspective, that is more than the M1 Garand, more than the Thompson submachine gun, and more than the 1911 pistol. Because of this massive Herculean production effort, American officers were now slinging a long arm right across their chests exactly like the enlisted men they were leading. If you're looking through a 4-power scope at 200 yards, peering through a thick, broken Norman hedgerow, the difference between an M1 Garand and an M1 carbine was basically zero. It was imperceptible. So the pistol, the absolute biggest visual marker on Earth, was effectively gone. Map cases folded up and stuffed into jacket pockets. Binoculars handed out widely to regular NCOs and forward observers. The entire equipment checklist was wiped clean.
Let's shift gears a bit and move to part 2, changing the geometry, or what we can think of as behavioral camouflage.
Because even without special equipment to spot, a sniper can just watch how a group behaves to figure out who the boss is, right? Well, this perfectly illustrates the deeper philosophical shift behind how the U.S. Army trained its guys. Take a look at the Soviet Army structure back then. It functioned kind of like a bicycle wheel with a single central hub. Every single action radiated directly from the officer. So if a sniper takes out that hub, the entire wheel just completely stops turning, sometimes for crucial minutes at a time. Enter General Leslie McNair, the commanding general of Army Ground Forces. He spotted this fatal flaw in the geometry immediately. So he trained American units to act more like a modern distributed network. Orders were passed laterally, man to man. If a lieutenant went down, a sergeant didn't wait around. He immediately stepped up. Leaders were specifically taught to command from inside the formation, not standing out in front waving an arm. The decision-making was entirely distributed, which essentially made the leaders structurally invisible to anyone watching from the outside.
And then there was the absolute golden rule of behavioral camouflage, a strictly enforced ban. Absolutely no saluting officers in a combat zone. Think about it. A salute is basically a giant neon sign pointing right at your decision maker for any sniper lurking within 400 yards. So the Americans banned it entirely in the field. No exceptions. If a young, nervous soldier forgot and instinctively saluted an officer, they were quickly and sharply corrected. And this actually gave birth to a super famous military catchphrase that is still used today. Don't sniper check me.
And that leads us to a truly poignant conclusion in part 3. The ultimate irony in the fate of the architect. The brilliant mind behind this entire sweeping system was that man we mentioned earlier, General Leslie McNair. In the summer of 1944, he wanted to see his life's work in action. He wanted to see it with his own eyes, right at the bleeding edge of the front lines. It's July 25th, right in the middle of Operation Cobra. This was a colossal close air support mission designed to finally break the brutal deadlock in the hedgerows by just carpet bombing the German positions. General McNair traveled to the front completely alone. No flashy motorcade, no polished staff cars, no giant entourage of aides buzzing around him. He traveled in complete anonymity. He stepped down into a muddy slit trench just a few hundred yards behind the planned bomb line, simply waiting for the sky to open up. Sitting down in that dirt trench, General McNair was the perfect, flawless embodiment of his own system. He was wearing the standard-issue olive drab uniform. He had the standard M1 steel helmet strapped to his head. There was absolutely no visible rank insignia pinned anywhere on his clothing, no map case. And he demanded absolutely zero special treatment from the young men huddled right next to him. He blended in so incredibly well among the regular infantrymen of the 30th Infantry Division that no enemy observer, and honestly, barely even his own men, could have possibly guessed that a highly decorated 3-star general was sitting right there in the dirt with them. But as we know, war is terribly chaotic. The thick smoke from the very first wave of heavy bombers actually blinded the planes coming in right behind them. Hundreds of bombs ended up falling short, landing directly on the American positions instead of the German lines. It was a devastating friendly fire incident, 111 Americans were killed that day, and tragically, right among them was General Leslie McNair. When the soldiers eventually found him in the aftermath, his body was so completely indistinguishable from the enlisted men around him that they could only actually identify him by searching for his hidden West Point class ring and finding the 3 small stars tucked away, hidden on his collar.
General McNair was buried in Normandy under a plain white marble cross, completely identical to the young private buried right next to him, invisible to the last. It is a profound and, frankly, a heartbreaking irony. General Leslie McNair built this massive structural system from the ground up to make American officers entirely anonymous on the world's deadliest battlefields. It worked so perfectly, so flawlessly, that even he was erased by it. And I think it leaves us with an incredibly fascinating question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. By building a system that ultimately hid his own identity in his final moments, how many thousands of young American lives did General McNair's architecture of anonymity actually save?